Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into what is arguably the most famous defense speech in history. We are not just exploring the trial of Socrates, we are really dissecting the logical architecture he used while standing before 500 Athenian citizens.
It's right, 500 jurors who literally held his life in their hands. We've got excerpts from Plato's Apology, which, records Socrates' defense speech. It's really the foundational text for understanding philosophy as a life lived, not just a set of abstract arguments.
Yeah, and the scene itself is just so dramatic.
Absolutely. Imagine this man. He's over 70 years old, spent his entire life just sort of wandering the Athenian marketplace, talking to people, and now suddenly he's on trial, having to defend himself against these really serious charges, corrupting the youth, defying the state religion. It's quite something.
Our mission, then, is precisely to analyze the brilliance of that defense. And it's not just about him arguing he's innocent, is it?
No, not at all. It's much bigger than that. It's about Socrates constructing this completely consistent, unwavering logical framework. He basically turns his legal defense into a kind of philosophical lecture.
So he uses the court's own rules, the rules of logic, against his accusers.
Exactly. To expose their ignorance, their inconsistencies, and in doing so, he defines what genuine wisdom truly is. It's a masterclass.
We'll see how he employs these techniques of rigorous reasoning, things like reductio ad absurdum.
Yes, proving a point by showing that its opposite leads to a ridiculous and absurd conclusion. It's a powerful tool. And we'll also see how he manages to turn the fear of death, which you'd think would be his biggest weakness.
Right.
He turns it into his ultimate philosophical strength. It's really, if you want a lesson in intellectual courage, this is probably it.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. When Socrates gets up to speak, he immediately tackles this issue of his speaking style, doesn't he?
Yeah, the first thing that's fascinating is how he sets the tone. His accusers apparently had warned the court, don't be misled by this guy's eloquence, right? They tried to paint him as some kind of slick talker. And he doesn't exactly deny his force of speech, but he completely redefines what eloquence means. It's a classic Socratic move, shifting the definition.
How so?
Well, back in 399 BC Athens, you had this whole industry of professional speakers, the sophists. Big names, charging huge fees.
People like Gorgias.
Gorgias, Prodicus, yeah. They taught rhetorical tricks, how to win arguments, how to make the worse appear the better cause, as the saying went. Socrates immediately draws a line in the sand. He says, look, if eloquence means speaking the truth, then okay, I'm eloquent.
But he rejects their style.
Completely.
Yeah.
He says, I'm not going to give you some polished, prepared oration full of fancy phrases. That's not me.
He actually asks for clemency, right? He says, look, I'm over 70. I've never been in a law court before.
Yeah, he pleads ignorance of court procedure. He says, basically, judge me by the justice of my cause, not by the polish of my delivery. Don't expect fancy rhetoric. I'm just going to speak like I always do, like I speak in the marketplace.
Which he claims is the language of truth.
Precisely. And by doing this, right at the start, he establishes the central conflict of the whole trial. Are we here to judge a performance, or are we here to judge the truth?
He's forcing them to choose substance over style.
Exactly. And this is crucial because a lot of the prejudice against him was tied up in this popular idea that he was just another one of those sophists.
So he needed to differentiate himself immediately.
Instantly. From Gorgias, Prodicus, Evenus, all those guys who charged money and taught argument for argument's sake, he's saying, that's not me.
And that denial that he's not a paid teacher, it leads him right into addressing what he sees as the real danger, which he actually splits into two groups of accusers.
Right. He makes this logical division. There are the later accusers, that's the formal indictment, Miletus, Anytus, and Lycon. They're the ones bringing the actual charges now.
But he says he's more afraid of the older accusers.
Much more afraid. These are the ancient anonymous slanderers, the rumor mongers, people whispering in corners for years. And critically, he includes the comic poets, like Aristophanes.
Aristophanes, who wrote The Clouds decades earlier, making fun of a character named Socrates.
Exactly. Skewered him. Portrayed him as this ridiculous and natural philosopher floating in a basket teaching nonsense.
But why are those old rumors, those jokes almost, so much more terrifying to him than the actual legal charges he's facing right now?
Because, as he puts it, they represent deep-seated prejudice. These rumors, he says, took possession of your minds when the jury members were young, impressionable kids.
So they grew up hearing this stuff.
They heard it for decades. And crucially, he points out these accusations were made by default. There was none to answer them publicly back then. You couldn't cross-examine a joke in a play or a rumor in the marketplace.
How do you fight that? It's like fighting shadows.
It is. How do you fight a prejudice that someone's held since they were a teenager? It's almost impossible to cross-examine a phantom reputation that's been building for years.
It really sounds like he's dealing with maybe the first recorded instance of long-term media slander where a cultural caricature eventually hardens into a criminal charge.
That's a great way to put it.
So what exactly was the content of this old slander, this public perception he's so afraid of?
He summarizes it brilliantly. He puts it into this formal sounding, almost like an affidavit statement. He puts the phantom charge on the record.
What does this say?
Yeah, it says, Socrates is an evildoer and a curious person who searches into things under the earth and in heaven and made the worse appear the better cause. And he teaches the aforesaid doctrines to others.
Wow. That single sentence ropes him in with several really suspicious groups in Athenian society.
Exactly. It's cleverly constructed slander. First, searching into things under the earth and in heaven that immediately links him to the natural philosophers, the cosmologists.
People who often got into trouble for impiety, like Anaxagoras.
Right, and Anaxagoras got exiled for saying the sun was just a hot rock, not a god. So that's dangerous territory.
Okay, what's the second part?
Making the worse appear the better cause. That links him directly to those mercenary sophists, suggesting he teaches clever tricks to cheat people, basically immorality for cash.
And the third part?
That he teaches the aforesaid doctrines to others. This paints him as a paid teacher, a professional disruptor spreading these dangerous ideas.
And he denies all 3 points.
Emphatically. He says he knows next to nothing about natural philosophy, about things up in the clouds and under the earth. He challenges anyone in the court to say they've ever heard him discuss such things.
And the charge of being a paid teacher.
He points to his lifelong notorious poverty. He says, look around. Does this look like a man who got rich teaching? He contrasts himself sharply with the wealthy sophists. He argues his poverty is definitive proof he never took a penny for his conversations.
So this initial part is all about clearing the ground, dealing with the old prejudice before he even gets to the specific charges from Miletus.
Yes, it's essential stage setting. By confronting and denying this vague ancient caricature, he forces the court, or tries to force them, to focus only on the specific narrow charges brought by Miletus, Anytus, and Lycon.
It's a logical move to narrow the scope of the debate.
Absolutely. He's trying to make his current accusers stand on their own flimsy merits, rather than ride the wave of decades of slander.
Okay, so having denied being a sophist or a natural philosopher, that brings us right to the core of his defense, doesn't it? Why does he have this strange, controversial reputation if it's not for those reasons?
Exactly. And this is where the whole thing shifts. The legal defense starts to morph into a justification of his entire life's purpose. And it all hinges on the Oracle of Delphi.
Ah, the famous story.
Right. He explains his reputation stems from, as he puts it, a certain sort of wisdom which I possess. But he immediately qualifies it. He's very careful. He says it's not any kind of superhuman wisdom.
He's setting the bar low, almost ironically.
Very ironically. He basically is saying, look, the only wisdom I have is understanding my own ignorance. But then he brings in the god.
He introduces the testimony of the god Apollo via the oracle at Delphi. His friend Chaerephon went there.
Yes, his enthusiastic, maybe slightly impulsive friend Chaerephon goes to Delphi and asks the oracle point blank, is anyone wiser than Socrates?
And the Pythia, the priestess, answers.
She answers that there was no man wiser.
Which must have stunned Socrates.
Absolutely, because this creates the ultimate Socratic paradox. Socrates insists, I know that I have no wisdom, small or great. He's acutely aware of his own ignorance.
Yet the god, Apollo, who famously cannot lie, has just declared him the wisest man alive.
It's a divine riddle. He can't possibly be wise in the way people usually mean it. But the god can't be wrong. So Socrates concludes this isn't a compliment, it's an instruction. It's a puzzle he has to solve.
So his philosophical quest wasn't driven by arrogance, but by a sense of, well, religious duty, to figure out what the god meant.
Precisely. He felt compelled to understand the oracle, his method, to set out and find someone wiser than himself. If he could find just one person demonstrably wiser, he could go back to the god, metaphorically speaking, and say, see, you're wrong, here's someone wiser.
That reframes his whole life's work. It wasn't about annoying people for fun, it was about testing the god's word. He calls them his Herculean labors.
He does. And this quest is where he develops and relentlessly applies his signature logical tool, the method of constant cross-examination.
The elenchus.
Absolutely. The elenchus. It literally means refutation or cross-examination. It's this technique of really rigorous, persistent questioning.
What's the goal?
The goal isn't necessarily to arrive at a final truth, but to uncover the internal contradictions in his dialogue partner's own beliefs or statements. He wasn't trying to tell them the answer. He was trying to show them that they didn't really know what they thought they knew, to reveal their own ignorance to themselves.
So he takes this method out into the streets, the marketplace, the agora of Athens, and he targets people with the biggest reputations for wisdom. Who does he start with?
Starts at the top, the politicians, leading statesmen of Athens.
And what does he find?
This is maybe the most damning part of his investigation for the Athenian elite. He finds these men were thought wise by many and wiser still by themselves, but under his persistent questioning.
They couldn't hold up.
Their beliefs crumbled. They held strong opinions, especially about justice and virtue, but they couldn't logically defend them. They couldn't give a coherent account of what they claimed to know.
And this is where he makes that crucial discovery, the thing that defines his own peculiar brand of wisdom.
Exactly. He says of a typical politician he examined, he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know.
That's the famous line.
It is. In this latter particular, then, I seem to have slightly the advantage of him. It's the core principle of Socratic irony and intellectual humility.
He's basically identifying what we might now call the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The less you know, the more confident you are.
That's a very modern way to put it, but yes, it captures the essence. Socrates' wisdom is purely negative. It's the profound awareness of his own ignorance, knowing the limits of human knowledge. The politician lacks that self-awareness.
But he doesn't stop at the politicians. He moves on. Who's next?
He goes to the poets. Remember, poets in ancient Greece were revered figures, seen as sources of wisdom and moral insight, not just entertainers.
Like Homer, Hesiod.
Exactly. So Socrates takes their most beautiful, most celebrated passages, the lines everyone quoted, and he asks the poets themselves, what did you really mean by this?
And the result?
It's fascinating. He finds they spoke many fine things, often with incredible beauty and power, but it seemed to come from a kind of genius and inspiration, almost like prophets or diviners.
But they didn't understand it rationally.
When he pushed them, they couldn't give a logical explanation of their own work. They couldn't unpack the meaning rationally. It was inspired, perhaps, but not understood.
And their critical mistake, the thing that made them resent Socrates.
It was intellectual overreach, the same trap in a different form. Because they possessed this amazing talent for writing beautiful verse, they falsely assumed this made them wise in other much bigger matters too.
Like politics or ethics.
Precisely. All sorts of high matters, as Socrates puts it. They thought their poetic gift translated into comprehensive wisdom about everything. They confused inspiration with understanding.
So politicians think they know, but don't. Poets are inspired, but don't understand. Who's the third group?
The artisans, the craftsmen, the skilled workers.
People who actually know how to do things. Build ships, make statues, craft pottery.
Yes, and Socrates fully acknowledges this. He finds they do possess genuine, practical knowledge. They know their craft inside out, many fine things that he himself is ignorant of.
So surely they must be wiser.
Initially, he thinks maybe, but sadly they fall into the exact same logical trap as the poets.
How so?
Because they have mastered their specific practical skill making a pot, building a wall, they then assume they are also wise in the most important matters.
Politics, morality, the meaning of life.
Right. Socrates argues that this conviction that their technical skill somehow grants them wisdom about virtue and justice actually overshadows and corrupts their genuine but limited practical knowledge.
So after this incredibly thorough citywide investigation, which he says took all his time, kept him in poverty, and made him loads of enemies, he finally understands the oracle's riddle.
Yes. He realizes the oracle wasn't praising the content of his knowledge. He had none. The oracle was praising the nature of his self-awareness.
His awareness of his own ignorance.
Exactly. He concludes that God only is wise. True wisdom belonged to the divine. The oracle used Socrates' name merely as an illustration, a paradigm.
Meaning?
He, O man, is the wisest who, like Socrates, knows that his wisdom is in truth worth nothing. The highest human wisdom is simply recognizing the profound limits of human knowledge, acknowledging our ignorance.
But the consequence of this divine mission, this relentless logical dissection of people's cherished beliefs, wasn't gratitude, was it?
Far from it. It generated immense hatred, resentment, and calumny. Every powerful politician he embarrassed, every revered poet he showed couldn't explain his own work, every successful craftsman he revealed was overreaching, they all became his enemies.
And it wasn't just them, right? He mentions the young people who followed him around.
Yes, that made it even worse in some ways. The young wealthy men with time on their hands loved watching him publicly humiliate the so-called wise man. It was great entertainment.
And they started imitating him.
They started doing their own amateur elenchus, cross-examining people, which just annoyed everyone even more. And then, Socrates notes, people whose ignorance was exposed by these young imitators blamed him, Socrates, as the source of this irritating behavior.
They mistook his ability to reveal ignorance in others for him actually possessing some secret knowledge himself.
Precisely. They assumed he must know the answers if he could so easily show others didn't. This created envy and malice. And this buildup of resentment over many, many years, he argues, is the real underlying motivation for the three men who finally brought the formal charges. Meletus, representing the offended poets. Anytus, a powerful politician, likely representing the craftsmen and politicians he'd embarrassed. And Lycon, representing the orators or rhetoricians. They were just the front men for decades of accumulated hostility.
Okay, so having dealt with the background, the ancient slander, Socrates finally pivots to the specific legal charges brought by Meletus, corrupting the youth and impiety.
Yes, and this is where we see the Socratic method deployed not just as a philosophical tool, but as a devastating legal weapon. He doesn't just deny the charges. He uses logical cross-examination to force his accuser, Meletus, to contradict himself and look foolish.
It's quite the performance. Let's start with the first charge. Corrupting the youth. How does he tackle that?
He goes on the attack immediately. He turns to Meletus and asks him a seemingly simple question. If I am the corrupter of youth, who is their improver? Who makes them better?
He's demanding Meletus identify the positive force if Socrates is the negative one?
Exactly. And Meletus, perhaps caught off guard, initially says the laws improve the youth.
Okay, fair enough. But Socrates pushes him.
He pushes him hard. That's not what I asked. I asked who. Which person knows the laws and applies them to improve the youth? Meletus then names the judges, the members of the jury, right there in front of him. Then Socrates keeps pushing. What about the audience? The members of the council? The assembly? And Meletus, getting flustered, ends up agreeing that basically all Athenians improve the youth.
Except Socrates.
Except Socrates. He alone is the sole corrupter of the city full of improvers.
That sounds unlikely.
It sounds absurd, and Socrates immediately pounces on the absurdity with the brilliant analogy, the famous horse analogy.
Ah, yes. Tell us about that.
He says, look, think about horses, or any other animal for that matter. Is it true that everyone improves them, and only one person harms them?
No, obviously not.
Obviously not. It's the opposite. Usually only one person, the skilled trainer or maybe a very few experts, actually improve horses. The vast majority of people, if they try to handle them without knowledge, generally harm or corrupt them.
So his point is,
if this is true for animals, isn't it far more likely to be true for something as complex as educating human youth? That expertise is rare, and incompetence or indifference is common.
It completely undermines Meletus's claim.
It does more than that. Socrates says this ridiculous answer proves Meletus's utter carelessness about the very issue he's brought Socrates to trial for. If Meletus actually cared about the youth and their education, he wouldn't have made such a patently absurd statement. He clearly hasn't thought about it at all.
It exposes the charge as possibly frivolous or driven by other motives.
Precisely. But Socrates isn't done with this charge yet. He sets another logical trap, this one focusing on the crucial legal concept of intent.
Okay, how does this work?
He first gets Meletus to agree to a basic premise. Good people tend to do good to those around them, their neighbors, while bad people tend to do evil or harm to their neighbors. Seems reasonable.
Sure.
Then he asks Meletus, do you think I corrupt the youth intentionally or unintentionally? And Meletus, wanting to make the charge as serious as possible, insists Socrates does it intentionally.
Which seems like the stronger accusation, right? Malicious intent.
It seems like it, but it walks right into Socrates' trap. This is the core of his argument from self-interest, and it's a really clever piece of reasoning, especially in the context of Athenian assumptions about rationality.
So what's the argument?
Socrates argues, okay, we agreed bad people harm their neighbors. We also agree that nobody wants to be harmed by their neighbors, right? No rational person willingly seeks to associate with people who will harm them.
Makes sense.
So if I, Socrates, intentionally corrupt the young men I associate with every day, I am intentionally making them worse. potentially making them into bad people who might then harm me.
Why would he do that?
Exactly. Why would any rational person intentionally create harm for themselves? It makes no sense. No one willingly seeks harm.
So the logical conclusion is,
Therefore, one of two things must be true. Either I do not corrupt the youth at all, or if I do corrupt them somehow, I must be doing it unintentionally out of ignorance.
and this distinction is legally critical.
Absolutely critical in Athenian law. Because if the harm, the corruption, is unintentional, it's not considered a crime you prosecute in court with the threat of death.
What's the proper procedure then?
The law required for unintentional harms or errors, private admonition and instruction. You take the person aside, you explain their error, you educate them, you don't drag them into court seeking the death penalty.
So Miletus is trapped.
Completely trapped. Socrates forces him into an impossible dilemma. Either Socrates is the only man in Athens so irrational that he deliberately tries to make his associates harmful to himself, which is unbelievable. Or Socrates corrupts unintentionally, in which case Miletus is abusing the legal process by bringing a capital charge instead of offering private correction.
It suggests Miletus isn't motivated by genuine concern for the youth, but by something else. Malice, maybe?
That's the strong implication. Socrates basically annihilates the legal basis for the corruption charge through pure logic.
Okay, wow. So then he turns to the second charge, impiety. This one seems trickier.
It does. But Miletus makes an even bigger logical blunder here, if you can believe it.
How so? What's the specific charge?
Miletus, in the indictment and under Socrates' questioning, ends up accusing Socrates of two completely contradictory things at the same time.
Which are?
First, he accuses Socrates of being a complete atheist, believing in no gods at all, absolutely in none at all, as Socrates quotes him.
Okay, total atheism.
But second, the indictment also charges Socrates with introducing new divinities, or spiritual agencies, often translated as daimonia, which were understood as demigods or lesser divine beings.
Wait, how can you be a total atheist and believe in new divine beings?
You can't. It's a blatant self-contradiction. Socrates immediately calls it out as a riddle, designed purely to test or confuse the court.
How does he dismantle it?
First, he deals with the crude atheism charge quickly. He basically says Miletus is confusing him with Anaxagoras again, the natural philosopher. He points out that Anaxagoras' ideas, like the sun being a stone, are readily available in books anyone can buy cheaply in a marketplace.
So he's saying, I'm not teaching some secret atheist doctrine. You're just recycling old, irrelevant accusations.
Exactly. It's a cheap shot by Miletus. But the real logical masterstroke, the reductio ad absurdum, comes when Socrates focuses on the second part of the charge, the belief in new spiritual agencies, or daimonia.
Right, the demigods.
He asks Miletus a series of simple analogy questions. Did ever man, Miletus, believe in the existence of human things and not of human beings?
Like, can you believe in horsemanship without believing horses exist?
Precisely. Or flute playing without believing flute players exist? The answer, obviously, is no. The activity implies the agent.
Okay, so how does that apply to gods?
Socrates says, you accuse me of believing in and teaching about spiritual or divine agencies, daimonia, but these agencies, these demigods, are universally understood to be either gods themselves or the children of gods.
Ah, so if you believe in the children of God.
You necessarily must believe in their parents, the gods. You can't believe in demigods if you're a complete atheist who denies the existence of all gods.
It's like believing in mules, he says, but denying the existence of horses and asses.
Exactly. It's an almost comically clear analogy. The logic is inescapable. By forcing Miletus to stick to the indictment's claim that Socrates believes in divine agencies, Socrates logically proves that the accompanying charge of absolute atheism must be false.
The charge contradicts itself.
Fundamentally, Socrates concludes the entire indictment is just nonsense, cooked up out of wantonness and youthful bravado by Miletus. He argues he's not being prosecuted for any real crime, but simply because Miletus and his backers are angry that Socrates has exposed their ignorance.
So, having logically demolished the actual legal charges, Socrates then shifts gears, doesn't he? He moves from defense to justification, explaining the moral basis for his entire way of life.
Yes, this is where the apology transcends being just a court speech and becomes a foundational document of ethical philosophy. He anticipates the obvious criticism. Okay, Socrates, maybe you're innocent, but look where your philosophical life has led you to trial, likely to death. Wasn't it reckless?
He faces that head on. He doesn't shy away from the fact that his path could lead to an untimely end.
Not at all. And he lays out this incredibly powerful moral principle. He says, a good man when deciding what to do, should never calculate the chances of living or dying. That's irrelevant.
What should he calculate?
Only one thing: whether the action itself is right or wrong, whether he is acting the part of a good man or a bad man. That's the only calculation that matters.
And he brings in a powerful example from mythology to illustrate this.
A very powerful one for a Greek audience: Achilles, the greatest warrior. Achilles knew that if he avenged his friend Patroclus by killing Hector, the gods had foretold he would die soon after. His own mother warned him.
But he did it anyway.
He chose honor, duty to his friend, and avoiding disgrace over a longer life lived in shame. Socrates explicitly places himself in that heroic tradition. For him, philosophical duty and virtue override the mere instinct for self-preservation.
Wow. And this connects directly to his view on death itself. He calls the fear of death
Caught a pretense of wisdom. This is radical. Everyone assumes death is the greatest evil. But Socrates asks, how do you know?
You don't. It's unknown.
Exactly. Fearing death, he argues, is pretending to know something you absolutely don't know. Namely, that death is bad. It's claiming wisdom you don't possess.
So his logic is, since I know nothing about what happens after death, I can't rationally fear it as an evil, but I do know something for certain.
Yes. He knows with certainty that injustice, acting wrongly, and disobeying a clear command from God or a just superior, that is a definite evil and a definite disgrace.
So the choice is clear for him.
Crystal clear. He will never choose to commit a certain evil, like abandoning his philosophical mission, just to avoid a merely possible unknown outcome, death, which might even turn out to be good.
Which leads him to maybe the most defiant statement in the whole speech, aimed right at the jury.
The absolute peak of his defiance. Men of Athens, I shall obey God rather than you.
Imagine saying that to the 500 people deciding whether you live and die.
It's astonishing courage. He makes it absolutely plain. If they were to offer him acquittal, let him go free, but only on the condition that he's stop philosophizing, stop questioning people, stop examining life.
He would refuse.
He would absolutely refuse. He says he will never cease from the practice and pursuit of philosophy as long as he has life and strength. His mission is divinely ordained, he believes, and stopping would be the ultimate act of impiety and betrayal of virtue.
What exactly does he see this mission requiring him to do? What's the core message he feels compelled to deliver?
It requires him to be a constant personal goad to every single citizen he meets, to approach them individually and exhort them, urge them, reproach them if necessary.
Urge them to do what?
To care less about accumulating money, reputation, and honors, and to care more about wisdom and truth, the greatest improvement of the soul. That's the priority.
And he has this famous line about virtue and money.
Yes, a cornerstone of his teaching. Wealth does not bring about virtue, but virtue brings about wealth and every other good, both public and private. He completely flips the conventional wisdom.
He's saying moral excellence is the source of all real value, including material well-being, not the other way around.
Exactly. True prosperity for the individual and the city flows from the pursuit of virtue.
Okay, this insistence on being a public pest, constantly nagging the citizens about their souls, brings us to that unforgettable metaphor he uses.
The gadfly. It's maybe the most enduring image from the Apology.
How does it work?
He warns the Athenians, look, if you kill me, you will injure yourselves more than you injure me. Why? Because they'd be destroying a gift from the god.
A gift? How so?
He says the state, Athens, is like a great and noble steed, powerful but also large, and because of its size, prone to becoming sluggish and complacent.
Okay, a big, lazy horse.
Right. And he, Socrates, is the gadfly, sent by the god to attach itself to this horse. And what does a gadfly do?
It stings, it irritates, it keeps the horse awake.
Precisely. He says his job, his divine mission, is to sting the Athenian state, to constantly arouse it, persuade it, and reproach it, waking it out of its comfortable stupor, forcing it to think about virtue.
So if we translate that, he's essentially saying he's the necessary irritant, the essential critic, the whistleblower maybe, who prevents the institution from just decaying through complacency.
That's a perfect modern analogy. He's the social friction required for genuine self-reflection and improvement. He keeps the city intellectually and morally alive, even though it's annoying.
And what's his proof that this annoying mission is genuinely from the god and not just his own weird hobby or a way to gain influence?
His poverty. His utter, lifelong, demonstrable poverty. He challenges anyone in the court to bring forward a witness who could claim he ever charged a fee or made any money from his activities.
And no one could.
No one could. He argues his poverty is the irrefutable witness to the truth of his claim that he serves the god, not himself. He dedicated his entire life to this mission, neglecting his own affairs, precisely because it was a divine calling, not a career choice.
It's a powerful point. But then he has to address a reasonable question. If you're so virtuous and dedicated to the city's welfare, Socrates, why did you always avoid direct political life? Why not run for office, join the assembly, where you could have done the most good?
It's a very fair question, and he has a specific answer. He refers again to his daimonion, that divine sign or inner voice he claimed to have.
The voice that only ever stopped him from doing things.
Exactly. It never told him what to do, only what not to do. And he says this divine sign consistently forbade him from entering a public political career.
Why?
Because, he asserts bluntly, a man who genuinely fights for justice and honestly opposes the many unjust things that happen in any state, well, that man will not save his life.
He's saying the political system itself is too corrupt, too dangerous for a truly honest man.
He's saying that if he had entered politics and refused to compromise his principles, refused to go along with popular injustice or tyrannical commands, he would have been killed long, long ago. His private life of philosophical questioning was, ironically, the only way he could survive long enough to fulfill his mission.
And he doesn't just state this. He provides concrete examples from his own life to back it up. Deeds, not just words.
Crucially, yes. He offers proof that his commitment to justice over survival wasn't just talk, and it applied regardless of whether Athens was a democracy or an oligarchy.
What are the examples?
Two key moments. First, the trial of the generals after the Battle of Arginusae. This was under the democracy. The generals were accused of failing to rescue shipwrecked sailors, and the popular mood was furious. They wanted to try all 10 generals together as a group, which was illegal under Athenian law.
Each man had the right to an individual trial.
Correct. Socrates happened to be serving on the presiding committee, Bryantones, that day. The crowd was baying for blood, threatening the committee if they didn't allow the illegal joint trial. Socrates says he was the only one on that committee who refused to put the illegal motion to a vote. He stood against the entire assembly, risking prosecution and possibly death, simply because it was unlawful.
Wow. And the second example?
This was under the brutal oligarchy, the 30 tyrants, who ruled Athens briefly after the Peloponnesian War. The 30 commanded Socrates and 4 other men to go to Salamis and arrest an innocent man named Leon, whom they wanted to execute unjustly.
What did Socrates do?
The other 4 went. Socrates simply ignored the command and walked home. He quietly refused to participate in an unjust act, knowing full well that defying the 30 usually meant immediate execution. He says he likely would have been killed for it if the oligarchy hadn't been overthrown shortly after.
So he's using these specific, verifiable instances to prove his point. When push came to shove, under immense political pressure from both democratic mobs and tyrannical rulers, his commitment to law and justice was absolute, even at the risk of his own life.
Exactly. And this, he implies, logically validates his choice to pursue philosophy privately rather than entering the inevitably compromising world of politics. His life's path was the only one consistent with unwavering virtue.
The jury, despite all this, finds him guilty. Though Plato notes the vote was surprisingly close, if only 30 votes had gone the other way, he'd have been acquitted.
Yes, a narrow margin. And now, according to Athenian court procedure, since the prosecution proposed death, the convicted defendant, Socrates, gets to propose an alternative penalty.
And this is where we get some of the most famous and certainly the most defiant moments of the entire apology. He doesn't exactly beg for mercy.
No, he approaches the counter penalty with the same unwavering logical consistency, mixed with profound irony. They ask him, "Okay, Socrates, what penalty do you think you deserve?"
And his answer?
He says, "What do I deserve for spending my whole life neglecting my own affairs to wander around urging you all to care about virtue? What I deserve is a reward."
A reward? What reward?
Free meals for life at public expense in the Prytaneum.
We need to pause there. What exactly was the Prytaneum? Why is that so audacious?
The Prytaneum was like the city's sacred hearth, a public hall. It was where they honored the city's greatest benefactors, Olympic victors returning in glory, major public figures, visiting dignitaries. They were given free maintenance, free meals there for life. It was the absolute highest public honor Athens could bestow.
So for Socrates, a man just convicted of corrupting the youth and impiety, standing there in poverty, to propose this as his just desert.
It's breathtakingly audacious. It's almost comical in its defiance, but he logically defends it. He argues he is a far greater benefactor to Athens than any Olympic champion. An Olympic victor brings the city the appearance of happiness, the glory of winning. But he, Socrates, by forcing them to examine their lives and pursue virtue, offers them the reality of happiness. Therefore, logically, he deserves the greater reward.
It's utterly consistent with his life's mission, even if guaranteed to antagonize the jury.
Absolutely. He knows it will likely seal his fate, but he won't compromise his principles, even now.
So, having proposed the impossible reward, he then systematically rejects the actual penalties that might be considered.
Right. He goes through the realistic options. Imprisonment. No, he says, why should I live in prison? Becoming a slave to the rotating board of magistrates. That's unacceptable.
A monetary fine.
He says he can't propose a fine because he's poor, he has no money to pay one. Although, interestingly, Plato hasn't mentioned that his friends, Plato himself, Crito, Critobulus, Apollodorus, are right there, urging him to propose a fine and offering to guarantee payment. He suggests a modest sum based on their backing.
But his primary argument isn't about the money, is it? It's exile he focuses on.
Yes, exile is the most plausible alternative penalty the jury might have accepted. But he rejects it vehemently.
Why? Wouldn't leaving Athens save his life?
Yes, but on what terms? He argues that if he goes to another city, he won't suddenly change his nature. He cannot stop philosophizing, questioning, examining. It's who he is. It's his divine mandate.
And if he keeps doing it elsewhere,
He'll just annoy the people there too, especially the young men who will flock to him, and then their fathers and elders will drive him out again. Exile just means repeating the same cycle elsewhere. It solves nothing.
and this is where we get that absolutely immortal line, the sentence that arguably encapsulates his entire philosophy and maybe Western philosophy itself.
Exactly. The ultimate justification for why exile and the silence it would imply is impossible for him.
Oi de anexitas tos bios oputos anthropougi.
The unexamined life is not worth living for a human being. That's it. For Socrates, a life without philosophical inquiry, without self-reflection, without questioning values and assumptions, is simply not a truly human life. It's not worth enduring. Accepting exile and silence would be a spiritual death, a betrayal of his own humanity and his duty to the god. That, for him, is a fate far worse than physical death.
So logically, death is preferable to an unexamined life.
For him, yes. Given the choice, he must choose death over abandoning philosophy.
The jury, unsurprisingly perhaps, after the Prytaneum proposal and the rejection of exile, rejects his counterpenalty and votes for death. But even then, Socrates isn't finished. He has some final words, including a prophecy for those who condemned him.
He does. He addresses those who voted to convict him. He knows the irony. They think they're getting rid of an annoyance, silencing his criticisms. But he prophesies that they haven't solved their problem.
Oh.
He says that now, younger, harsher critics, perhaps his own followers, inspired by his example, but maybe less gentle, will rise up and subject the condemners' own lives to scrutiny. They will face even more censure than he ever gave them. Killing him won't stop the examination. It will only intensify it.
And he uses another beautiful metaphor here about two runners.
A very poignant one. He says the real difficulty in life isn't avoiding death. Death is like a slow runner, he says, and it has finally caught him, an old man. The real difficulty, the faster runner, is avoiding unrighteousness, avoiding wickedness.
And that runner?
That faster runner, wickedness, has caught his accusers and condemners. He says he's content to be overtaken by the slower runner, death, having spoken the truth and defended his virtue, rather than be overtaken by the faster runner, unrighteousness, by compromising his principles to survive.
It's a final assertion of his moral victory, even in legal defeat.
Completely. But then comes perhaps the most philosophically profound argument of the entire speech, where he considers the nature of death itself. And he offers a remarkable piece of personal evidence for why he doesn't fear it.
The silence of his divine sign?
Exactly. He calls it a wonderful circumstance. He tells the court that his customary daimonion, that inner voice which always, throughout his life, opposed him if he was about to do something wrong or harmful, even something quite minor.
It never failed to warn him.
Never, he claims. But on this day, the day of his trial and condemnation, the sign made no opposition at any point. Not when he left home, not while he was speaking, not when the verdict came in, not even now as he faces the sentence of death.
So the logical conclusion he draws from this divine silence is,
if the sign always stops him from doing something bad or heading towards something bad, and it did not stop him today, then what is happening to him now, namely dying, cannot be an evil. It must, in fact, be a good thing.
it's a stunning piece of subjective yet logically consistent reasoning based on his own deepest convictions. It proves, to his satisfaction, that those who think death is the greatest evil must be wrong.
Yes, and this leads him into his final, calm, philosophical contemplation of what death might actually entail. He lays out two logical possibilities.
Possibility one.
Possibility one, death is simply annihilation, a complete and utter end to consciousness, like falling into a deep, permanent, dreamless sleep.
And if that's the case?
He argues this would be an unspeakable gain. Think about it, he says. Compare a single night of perfect, undisturbed, dreamless sleep to all the other days and nights of your life, even the best ones. How many truly compare to that perfect peace?
Very few. Probably.
Very few. So if death is just that peaceful oblivion stretched out for eternity, it would be like only a single night, a profound release, a welcome rest, not something to be feared at all.
Okay, that's one possibility. What's the other?
Possibility two. Death is not annihilation, but a migration of the soul from this world to another place. The traditional Greek idea of Hades, but reimagined by Socrates.
And if that's true?
Then, he exclaims, it would be the greatest good imaginable. Why? Because it would mean an escape from the flawed, unjust judges here on earth.
Like the Athenian jury.
And a chance to meet and converse with the true, legendary judges of the afterlife. Minos, Rhadamanthus, Aeacus, Triptolemus. And not just them.
Who else?
He could meet and talk with the great poets and heroes of old, Orpheus, Musaeus, Hesiod, Homer, Achilles, Ajax, Odysseus. Imagine the conversations.
And crucially for Socrates, what could he do there?
He could continue his life's work. He could continue his philosophical questioning, cross-examining these great figures of the past to find out who among them is truly wise. And, he adds with a touch of irony, in that world, they certainly do not put a man to death for asking questions.
It's the ultimate philosopher's paradise. His mission becomes eternal.
Exactly. So, whether death is dreamless sleep or a philosophical afterlife, either way, it's not an evil and quite possibly a great good.
This leads him to his final, enduring principle, the bedrock conclusion derived from all this logic, his life experience, and the divine sign.
Yes. Know this for certain, that no evil can happen to a good man, either in life or after death. His fate is in the hands of the gods, and he trusts that having lived virtuously, he has nothing ultimately to fear.
His very last act is quite interesting, too. He turns the tables one final time.
He does. He asks his condemners, the men who voted against him, a final favor. Not for himself, but concerning his sons.
What does he ask?
He asks them, when his sons grow up, to please trouble them, vex them, annoy them in the exact same way he, Socrates, troubled and annoyed the Athenians.
How so?
If they see his sons caring more about money or reputation than about virtue, he wants the Athenians to reproach them. If his sons think they are something when they are nothing, he wants them to be called out, just as he called out the Athenians. If they do this, he says, then he and his sons will have received just treatment from them.
He wants the gadfly mission to continue, even applied to his own family, ensuring the next generation is also held to the standard of virtue.
It's his final legacy, the continuation of the examined life.
And the defense concludes with those incredibly famous, perfectly balanced words, acknowledging human limitation in the face of the ultimate questions.
The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die and you to live. Which is better, God only knows.
So when we synthesize all of this, the key logical takeaway seems clear. Socrates didn't really lose a legal battle. He won a philosophical argument.
I think that's exactly right. His defense wasn't aimed merely at acquittal within the flawed Athenian system. It was aimed at demonstrating the internal contradictions and, frankly, the carelessness of his accusers' logic.
He systematically refuted their charges using reason.
Yes, showing they were inconsistent, poorly thought out, and likely motivated by personal animosity and professional jealousy, rather than genuine concern for the state or religion.
And he constantly reframed the whole event, didn't he? Away from just being about him.
Absolutely. He turned it from a trial about his personal guilt or innocence into a profound moral and philosophical examination of the Athenians themselves, of their values, their understanding of wisdom, their commitment to justice. His ultimate defense wasn't a denial. It was his unwavering logical consistency and his commitment to virtue above all else.
It really does make you rethink so much about our own lives, our own anxieties. You see Socrates facing death, the ultimate unknown, and his argument is that fearing it is just pretended wisdom.
Right. How often do we fear things, failure, criticism, maybe even death, simply because we assume they are bad, without really examining that assumption? Socrates shows that the only evil we can know for certain is acting unjustly, compromising our own integrity.
Which leaves us, perhaps, with the really challenging thought that Socrates embodied. He chose poverty, antagonism, public criticism, and ultimately death, all in service of this mission he derived from a rigorous, logical interpretation of his own ignorance.
He lived his conclusion.
So if we take seriously his most famous assertion that the unexamined life is truly not worth living, what does that demand of us? What specific, maybe even radical changes might we need to make in our own lives to prioritize that vital examination, that search for truth and the improvement of our souls, over just chasing the easier, more conventional goals of money, status, and reputation?
That's the question the Apology leaves us with, isn't it? A profound challenge right from the dawn of philosophy.